Live from Cannes, welcome to the Media Roundtable Special Edition, where we always dive deep into the craft, where we really talk about, how do you make a campaign successful, specifically in audio. This show is always dedicated to the Chief Audio Officer. It's the fancy handle that we give to marketers who are responsible for the success of an audio campaign. I'm your host, Dan Granger, founder and CEO of Oxford Road, and this is a very special edition. We're going to broaden it out a little bit. We're here in the south of France at Cannes. We are hosted by Spotify in their studios at Spotify Beach, and I have a very special guest today who knows a lot about audio, but a lot about the digital media landscape. So we're going to have a bit more of a general conversation than we normally would, but there's definitely going to be a lot of takeaways for those of us that work specifically in this industry. Today, I am joined by Conor McKenna, who is partner at LUMA, the leading investment bank focused on digital media and marketing. If you've ever seen the LUMAscape, which is this beautiful graphic that just kind of diagrams for you who's who in the media ecosystem, who are the main players, that comes from LUMA. They host the Digital Media Summit. They have a LUMA Blanc party that they host now annually here at Cannes. And they also have a State of Digital Media report that they put out, which we're going to have a bit of our conversation about, because I think, if you're only working on audio or if you're a marketer who works on multiple channels, it's helpful to understand what's going on in the broader ecosystem and what's unique in the challenges that we're facing and what do we share with the rest of us. Because I think sometimes when we work in this space, we feel like our problems are unique to us. We're the only ones that struggle with attribution and things like that. Some of these things are common and some of them maybe are a little bit specific. So we're going to talk about that from somebody who I call periodically. Conor and I have been talking a few times a year for the last several years, really because he's got such an interesting perspective from the 30,000-foot view, being on the buying and selling side of the businesses within the ecosystem. So the way he'll look at stuff is a lot of times a perspective that you can't get elsewhere. And one other thing I'll say before we actually start talking to Conor here is that we have completely, at Oxford Road, stolen his marketing playbook. In addition to being a really credible investment bank that works in this space, they have an amazing content machine where they hold events and put out deliverables and presentations that I think the industry looks to get a picture of, just to make sense of it all. And when Conor asked me to join their Digital Media Summit a few years ago, I looked around, I said, this is amazing. How do we do this for audio? And that is how we got the Chief Audio Officer concept. And now we have our own summit coming up in July, very much ripping off what you guys have created. So I hope that's flattering.
Yeah.
Welcome. So Conor, just to set it up a little bit, can you give a little background on you and on LUMA, just for those that don't know you already?
Yeah, sure. I'm sure people are, wondering why are they listening to an investment banker to begin with on this.
Yeah.
So, I am an investment banker. We, we focus on M&A advisory in this space. I've been with LUMA for 10 years. I was in banking before that, but in insurance. So, massively boring compared to being in the south of France talking about far more interesting things. So at LUMA, our real differentiation and focus is sort of twofold. One is we go very deep in this sector, right? So we focus at this intersection of media, marketing, technology, and technology sort of being a core component. And the reason is, most banks are TMT, technology, media, broadly speaking. We're no, advertising technology, marketing technology, because there is a $1 trillion global TAM. On the digital side, it's been growing 20% a year for 20 years. Name any other industry that's ever had that amount of growth.
Hold on a second. $1 trillion TAM, what is it for non-digital today?
I don't know.
And I wonder does anybody even consider themselves non-digital?
There is non-digital, yeah, exactly.
Right? You don't identify as non-digital.
So what is
right?
non-digital? Flyers, I guess, even though they're printed digitally.
Yeah.
So, and they're collecting data digitally to find who to go. So, but it's it's a massive TAM. It's been growing on the digital side forever in some form of marketing, um, and it's also massively fragmented. So it's thousands of companies in this ecosystem, and it's incredibly complex and dynamic. Like every 7 months, something changes, and everyone has to react to it. And so what we realized is that is a ecosystem that needs advisors that are going deeper, understand the space, and then we sort of take that approach to how we do M&A, which is where can we actually match make? How can we set up companies? Where do we think the future's going? Like most bankers are not that opinionated. They're opinionated in selling their clients when they're selling them, but they don't take opinions at the outset. We kind of think of ourselves more as investors, but then come in with the advisors. So we go, where do we think the world is going? How can we put those companies together? And that gives an opportunity where you can set up situations where you're getting bought and not sold, and that actually creates a lot more leverage. And so we're constantly looking at the media landscape and trying to figure out where are there, new avenues, where are the trends, what's actually happening, who's going to be the winners and losers, and trying to, put those connections together.
Well, and there's been a lot of change in the last few years. Some of that we're going to talk about as we dip into the report that you guys just put out. But I guess I'm interested in what are the fundamental qualities of a business that is going to be successful in media, and that may be regardless of trends. What are what do you look for in a company to know if it's valuable? I know we're really going to the building blocks, right? Like at the very core.
There's not it's too broad of a question, right? There's too many specifics, even within like advertising technology, marketing technology. It's like, well, what channel are we talking about? But look, fundamentally that then all shows up in a few things. Like, what's your growth? What's your predictability of your customers? Are they sticking with you? Do you have strong net retention? And do you have operating leverage, which is really a signal of like technology versus services, right? Mm-hmm. So operating leverage can mean operating margin at some point, right, where you're profitable, but the bigger component is that you're selling something once that you don't have to continue to invest into, and as you scale, you don't need to continue to add more people. What Meta has done in the last year is like the best example of operating leverage ever. We're going to cut a ton of staff, and our profitability is going to go through the roof, and we're going to continue to grow with less people. Like, that's operating leverage. And ultimately what that means is you've got, so the growth and the predictability is you've got customers who want to buy your product and keep coming back, and the operating leverage is you have actual technology to scale this thing, and that's where there's a lot of value. Now, in this space, those are like the prerequisites for any company to be valuable, regardless, right? And then there's in M&A strategic value, which is is this something that someone else needs, right? Is this a capability that is becoming critically important? And that's where there's a massive amount of nuance, and it's constantly changing, and there's no answer. There's no one answer, right? It's like you can go in a deep dive of a million different segments, even in just this industry, of where some of that fits. So.
Great framework, and you answered the question perfectly. So here's something that has been striking me today. Mm-hmm. So I've never been to Cannes before. Okay, and here we are. I don't know how well the video is going to show, but the Riviera is behind me. Everything is magnificent. Everything here is beautiful. The creativity on display in all the different installations and exhibits and events, it's the best that man can do, right? And I'm walking around where they give the awards, because I think probably 1954, I believe, is when they started doing the Cannes Lions Awards, and we started giving each other prizes for creativity, right? So this is a great global celebration of creativity. And I think about, I don't know how much stock you put in like the kind of the old wisdom in advertising, but I'm like a David Ogilvy purist. Mm-hmm. Like his writing, Confessions of an Ad Man and Ogilvy on Advertising, that fundamentally shaped how I understand the world that we live in. And Ogilvy said that creativity is the most dangerous word in the lexicon of advertising, because it takes your eye off of the core business, which I think ties back to the fundamentals you're talking about, which are about driving business outcomes. It's about growth. It's about profitability, right? It's about leverage. If creativity is your goal, you don't necessarily achieve those things. Now, creativity is a tool that gets you there, but he really warned against celebrating creativity for its own sake. And so there has been something as I've been here that I've had a hard time squaring in my mind, and it just dawned on me this morning that we're here celebrating something that is actually in many ways a distraction from the job we are here to do. And I wonder, when you look across companies to figure out how fundamentally valuable they are, and they're not talking dollars and cents, and they're not talking about how you get more customers for a brand or customers for a platform. And it becomes about, here's something interesting that we're doing, here's something beautiful that we're doing. How much of that is necessary because we have to dress up the, cold, hard manufacturing process of customer acquisition, and how much of it is actually just us maybe getting a little carried away and taking our eye off the ball about what we're here to do?
Did not know where you were going to go with that question. I didn't. Look, I think I've said this before, and it's part of my job, and I actually think it's an incredibly important part of a founder's job, which is storytelling.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of talking at can, right? That's just people want to hear themselves talk, and there's a lot of lack of differentiation, and people.
Which is ironic to say on a podcast.
Yeah. But that, I mean, I think that's where you're it's creativity for creativity's sake, or to put creative out, and it gets lost in the void. But I don't think you can discount the value of storytelling for a business, which is a huge part of that. So I come back to that aspect of for a business, they do need to be telling what the future is. That's an incredibly important part, and the best founders are the ones who are actually able to do that, because especially in my business, for technology, if you can't paint a picture as to where this is going and why it's important, you're not gonna be able to continue to sell that vision and get people to buy your product. So often I'm working with companies that it's a capability that is not used yet. Mm-hmm. And so you need to be able to explain that. Now, is that advertising creative? That might be a part of it, and that might bolster the story. But ultimately, it comes from a fundamental, what is the story and the vision of what we're trying to tell? And so I don't think you can discount that part of it, outside the broader aspect of creative.
It's a great framing. And I agree with you. I think it is a both and. I mean, look, we all need to make things more palatable. I mean, if I hire somebody to work at Oxford Road, I think about, first, how good are they going to be at the job? Yeah. How successful do I think they're going to be at the KPIs and the things that we're measuring? But there is a component that's also, what are they going to be like to work with? What is that user experience? And I mean, just to use, kind of the corporate terminology, how frictionless is this process going to be? Do I like hanging out with this person?
Yeah.
Do I like who they are? Right. And so I believe it is a both and.
Well, I find on the hiring front, to play on that, with the storytelling, the best hires I've ever had they wouldn't say that they told a story, but that's what they did. They had a very clear articulation of, why are they sitting here?
Right.
Why did they come to this seat? What were the steps that got them here? They're not walking through their resume saying, oh, I did this, I did that, or I found this job somewhere, or, oh, I like investment banking because there's M&A is cool and it's interesting. I saw this deal. It's no, I took this step. That's where I learned this thing, and then I found this opportunity. So I made that move to do this and learn that skill. That brought me here. It's a storytelling in the end, and so I think it's a huge part of pitching yourself, pitching your product, pitching your capability. So I do think it all comes back to that.
Yeah, and so it seems like maybe where we can agree on this, and I mean, I agree with everything that you said, honestly, but I do think that as long as we don't take our eye off the ball on the fact that this is a business conference and we have a job to do, and creativity is a tool for that, but when I think, we always get carried away, just human beings get carried away, and when we take things to excess and we focus only on how good is your story, and people may love your story but not know who told it, because you were so caught. I mean, you watch a Super Bowl, right? And we always talk about, well, like, well, who was that ad even done by?
Yeah.
They might have told a great story, but you forgot that you're actually there to use that story to build a relationship with your customers. And so as long as those things get connected, I think that they work. But it's an interesting thing to see on display, and I think in an event like this, because there is so much creativity and beauty, you kind of get to see the full expression of it. You get to see the full extent.
Yeah, I mean, saying that we're here in Cannes for creativity is like a misnomer anyway. The only reason we're here is because people are here. And like as much talk about AI and everything else and technology, this industry is still, I mean, all industries are still run by people. And that's really, that's the only reason I'm here, right? I don't even have a badge to go see the stuff because I'm just here to connect with the people that are here and start talking about ideas and having this conversation. So yeah, I mean, yes.
Interesting. You didn't get the badge.
No, what do I need a badge for?
I don't. It's my first time. I'm learning. I got the badge. I thought
I
it
don't
was
need to
necessary.
see creativity awards. You know what I mean? Like,
All right.
I'm here to talk to you.
All right. Well, so I think this is a great setup to talk about where things are at today, digitally, because there is so much. Like, where can you not get away from the AI conversation, right? Like, there is so much happening so fast, and I think. There's fear in the marketplace. There's excitement in the marketplace. It seems like 2 years ago, everything was blockchain and Web3 and all, but that's all been substituted now. Don't hear a lot about that anymore. Yep. Everything is AI. So in your presentation, you said 2023 was about surviving, 2024 is about reviving, and 2025 is going to be about thriving. Can you just unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, I think, look, we've all been aware of the roller coaster it's been in the last few years. There's been, inflation and interest rate challenges and global unrest and that's impacted businesses and markets and all the rest. We've also had this challenge over the last few years of like, interest rates are about to come back, right? Or or in advertising, cookies are about to go away. You've had all this like it's about to happen, which is you're almost stuck in purgatory for the last few years. And so I think we're starting to come out of that. People are getting sort of in some ways used to the uncertainty, and so that's really what we're seeing is that like. And some of that's tied more to not complete macro, but sort of advertising technology, marketing technology, and M&A, frankly, around this, survive, revive, and thrive. But what we're seeing is that people are, getting more comfortable there. This year, we're past it. People did all the cuts. Like when everything was going crazy, everyone had to focus internally on their businesses. They started cutting heads, trying to figure out, are they going to go out of business? Can they get to profitability? Can they, right the ship? A lot of that has happened. This year, we're sort of coming back into, okay, now we can start thinking again about growth, but it takes time, right? And so that's why, 24 is sort of the revive. But then by 25, we think we'll really be at a place where, things like AI are actually being used and applicable, right? There's new growth into the market. Inflation rates and all that stuff will probably be, behind us at that point finally, right? And we'll stop focusing on that as the conversation. And so that's sort of the, survive, revive, and thrive.
Well, it's interesting. So it seems like everybody got the memo late 22, early 23 that like, all right, we need to move into this new age of efficiency and AI is coming. And so less bodies, more tech, right? But to what you said, the tech is going to still take a minute. The AI is actually, it's going to take a minute for us to figure out what is this? How do we use this in a constructive way?
Yeah.
And so with all the talk and all the hype, how much of the change do you think is actually productive versus more like intent and trying to show that like you're getting on board with the new mission?
I think probably a lot more the latter.
Yeah.
I think, for me right now, like the number of companies that I'll talk to, they're like, oh, we're an AI company. I'm like, okay, that's actually like a negative at this point because like, what are you? Like one, are you defensible? Is it something that's changed? You're not you're not what an AI company like the big players are. Microsoft, Meta and Amazon, or sorry, not Amazon, Google have said, I think this is public, over the next 3 years, they're going to spend $350 billion on infrastructure around AI. That is more than the combined market cap of the entire ad tech and martech ecosystem.
Yeah.
So those are the AI companies, right?
Yeah.
And they're going to build the infrastructure, and then people are going to have to build stuff on top of their platforms, which
Yeah.
is perfectly fine. But I think at this point, like, that's sort of where things are. We're too early, and what my biggest issue with AI is, especially when people are building into products, the differentiation is gone so quickly, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's like wait 3 weeks and someone else has done it cheaper, faster. So, I think right now there's just a lot of testing. I do think on the back end, I mean, you are seeing people find ways to be a lot more efficient and get more things out of people. I don't think that means holistic, changes. People are still going to be important. They're just going to actually be more output, which is generally a net positive. So I'm less worried about it from like a, job loss.
Well, let's go deeper into that. What is the defensible type of work to be done? Because I think everybody, whether you're a product or a service, you're looking at this and you're going, okay, how soon is what I'm doing going to be obsolete? I mean, I think about when we started our agency, it was like the e-commerce.com D2C boom, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, there is nothing that any of those companies do technologically that is not going to be replaced very, very quickly by tech that doesn't even require people to know how to code to create it, right? Mm-hmm. So what are the things that you believe are going to be lasting and durable, at least in the media ecosystem?
Look, I think ultimately it all comes down to distribution and people caring about you and your brand. And honestly, in some ways, that comes back to brand. So from a media ecosystem, like, it's about distribution and having an audience. And I think we're increasingly moving towards, like, authenticity and frankly, like, individuals being a big part of that brand. Like I've talked about this in our State of Digital, but there's been this massive shift of, like, brand value sitting at an enterprise where you thought of, the company, mm-hmm. to sitting with individuals. And you're seeing that, I think, massively in media companies in particular, where the individuals who you associate with. You're seeing it in sports as well, right? Like, mm-hmm. There's most, Gen Z don't watch sports, but they'll watch Steph Curry on Instagram, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's like, it's an individual. So I think that aspect of media is very enduring, and there'll be more AI and creative and all that, but I don't think that, AI can't make people watch something, right, or engage with something. So it might offer up suggestions, but that's because that AI is only doing that because people already care about it, and it sort of extrapolates it. But
yeah, I think the question that people are thinking about, I mean, I'm thinking about it even though I feel like I know the answer, but it's like, okay, when is AI going to be able to have a better conversation between the two of us than we're able to have ourselves? When are they going to bring, when is it going to be like the well-rested Dan who's like, spent 7 hours preparing.
Until 3 a.m. last
right.
night. Yeah.
Exactly. So like, when does it start to, you don't know the difference and it can just do virtually everything better, and will people accept that?
I don't have an answer to that. I mean, if I feel like I knew the answer to that, I wouldn't be sitting here.
Well, but I think where I'm putting we all have to place bets in how we live, though, right?
Yeah.
Like, we are making assumptions whether or not we're like pausing and being like, here's my strategy. Like, the way I'm prioritizing time and energy is that I do believe that the authenticity is becoming an increasingly precious commodity as things get more artificial.
Yeah.
And so, I think, and even in our industry, which is such a small part of that $1 trillion TAM, I just think about, like, how do we protect and make sure that people understand that they are listening to humans? Because I don't think that, I think even if you can have an interesting product, if you don't know that it's a person, there is something lost, whether or not, synthetic will never actually be able to replace real. Yeah. In relationship, and we are, I believe, like, formed and designed to connect with other people and to be in relationship with other people. So I think
bring
that's
it back
safe
to
ground.
Like podcasting.
Yeah.
Like, that's why this medium works so well, right? You feel like the person you're listening to. And like, I listened to Tim Ferriss from when he first started his podcast, and like, I don't know Tim Ferriss, but I sometimes feel like I know Tim Ferriss, right?
Yeah.
Like if I met him, I'd be like, oh, hey, what's going on? Like because it's such an intimate relationship over that amount of time listening to someone and feel authentic. So I agree. I mean, I think that is a big question mark of like, does AI start to replace anything? I don't know. I mean, you probably you'll start to have.
They're trying to.
It'll create a new business around tagging what's real and what's not, right?
Yeah. Well, I hope so. And somebody just put out a bill of rights for AI.
Yeah.
And like expectations, and I think we should have to watermark or somehow disclose when the voice that you're hearing is not a person. I hope we can like come around and come up with a quick sonic logo or something that just tells the listener, okay, not a person, that's okay.
Yeah.
Like I don't need every piece of news delivered to me by a real person, but I want to know.
Yeah.
I want to know if it's real
well,
or
especially
not.
when it's like news is now so much opinion, right? So it's like if it's an opinion, I'd like to know it's from a person,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting though. Like there are podcasts, and I'm not gonna out them here, but with recognizable people that are not actually recording anything, and the audience doesn't necessarily know that. They're not being informed, and I'm like, okay, this needs to change, and especially like, and I want to start getting into the your view on the industry that is audio, but you think about the currency of audio that makes it interesting, that really leverages the magic that you're talking about, of that authenticity, the longer conversation. We were talking off before we were online here. We were talking about like I can't tweet, like I'm too verbose, like so podcast is a great form for me, but it allows for a real authentic type of communication and conversation that other media channels don't really allow. And so when a host of a podcast that has some reach then goes to audience and says, listen, let me tell you about a problem that I had in my life and how this product or service really made an impact on me and my family or whatever.
Yep.
The conversion rate that's going to drive, even though you could buy that impression elsewhere, you could traffic that through programmatic or whatever. You can go put your creative canned ad in the, it can be one of 6 ads in a row and be like, hey, this is who I am. Come buy from me.
Yep.
The recommendation of the person is that is the golden goose of audio.
Yep.
Right? That is so much more valuable. But if that is done by AI, because it now can be, you're now betraying that trust that I think drives the listener to take action, because they're trusting that host believes what they're saying and they're taking their recommendation. And if they are saying that about something that they didn't necessarily use, they didn't necessarily know that they endorsed it, they don't necessarily care about the product or haven't actually experienced it, that feels like a massive betrayal to me and a real threat to the industry. And I have a feeling there's going to be a period of time when there's so much exuberance about using all this new tech for what it could do, that the rush to the capitalization of that'll drive us into some mistakes that we're going to have to course correct later. I don't know if that affects other media channels in the same way, but I definitely think it's important in audio.
Yeah, I agree, but like it's also, I mean, what's held back audio? It's the scalability and addressability, right? So that's like host-read ads are great, but they're very hard to scale, right? And so it limits what you can do, and especially in podcasting where it's such a like head and tail game where there's few players who get a ton of reach and a ton of audience. Well, yeah, they're selling out and they're doing perfectly fine because it's really cheap to make a podcast. And so, whatever advertising revenue they're doing is great, but they could actually make a lot more if they could personalize it and have, 50 different ads or 500 different ads or 1,000 different ads to different segments of their listener base, especially when they're in the millions. And so that you lose some authenticity or you lose some of that personal connection, but that's actually a better advertising market. I mean, there's a reason, like, on Facebook, Facebook has 9 million advertisers, right? Mm-hmm. It's still some of the best ads recommendations I've ever gotten are on that platform because they know so much about you. And so it's different because it's not a personal recommendation. So that part starts to get challenged. But I actually think for the audio ecosystem, more broadly, like embracing some of that is probably what this industry needs, because the lack of scalability and addressability is why it's a $2 billion market, not a $20 billion market, despite it being a massive amount of time spent and a massive amount of connection. And I mean, there's not anyone now who doesn't listen to podcasts, but it's a $2 billion ad business. Like,
Yeah.
that's a challenge. And so I think it's like a good and bad. I agree. I don't necessarily want, a million hosts to tell me everything they're recommending, because that's not authentic. But at the same time, if they, I personally, for this market, would rather see there be a much bigger ad market that's got a lot more advertisers coming into it. And for that, you need scalability. And so maybe we move away from the, I think like the recommendation works because there's little scale, so that, oh, this person really likes it. I think consumers, they understand they're still listening to an ad. They'd be fine getting much more ads, and this being a much bigger industry. You might lose that, like, the excitement around, Tim Ferriss recommended AG1 or whatever to me. But at this point, like, I know if it's just an ad for AG1, that's fine. So.
Well, all right. So we're in some deep and important waters here, and I think this is like the main topic that I wanted to talk to you about, is like your view on the audio ecosystem and why it is depressed compared to what it could be, right? And I think, just to share some numbers behind some of what you're saying, you can find different reports that say different things, but something like 28% of a consumer's time spent with media is with audio, whether that is radio, like old school terrestrial radio, which still gets the biggest slice of the pie, or it is streaming audio, which gets the second biggest slice of the pie, or it is podcast, the on-demand version, that gets like 10% of the money, but 90% of the buzz and passion, right? And we are in the throes of the digital transformation and trying to figure out where is it going. And, I've had my whole career here. I've been doing this for 21 years, starting in terrestrial radio, and I've seen a lot of the changes. And I have a vision for where I think the industry should go. To bridge that gap, because sorry, with 28% of that time, we only get about 4.5 cents on the dollar, right? So wildly undervalued. And why is that? And I hear what you're saying, which is, look, you don't have scalability, addressability at scale. And we go on Instagram and we see ads for things that, how did they know I needed something like that? But it's really compelling, right? It's like, okay, if they have my data, there are advantages to that, because they can really, narrowcast messages that are only relevant to me. Right now, audio doesn't do that well. There's probably people that will tell you that it's going well, but we're not there yet. We all kind of know that. It's a work in progress. And so I completely agree with you that addressability is going to open up new lines of revenue. But there's a few other facets, and I want to come back to the endorsement piece. But before we even go there, like, there is this conversation around ad load, right? Because one of the things that many of us that have been, committed so much of our lives to podcasting in the last decade, we're a little afraid that it just turns into radio, which was like, that's like, leaving the motherland and coming to America for a new opportunity. And then it just goes right back to where you left, right? Like, same old problems, like that, if we have 20 minutes of ads per hour, and you've got a 6-minute spot break every 15 minutes or whatever, it's like, is that not going to diminish the experience that has created so much passion and enthusiasm? Is there not some sort of balance where we can figure out ways to unlock monetization that commands the premium so that it gets its fair share relative to the influence that it has, but doesn't just clutter it up with so many commercials? And I do think addressability commands a premium in advertising. I mean, it's like, what do we see on digital? Because we can look ahead on where the future of audio is going to be by looking at that. And I think, you see that if you advertise on Facebook, you can pay 1 CPM to really target, and then a lower CPM if you don't want to target. And so you've got some tranches there, but what social media doesn't really have built into the marketplace is the ability to build in those personal recommendations. And I think that's where you have to draw the line. But the value of that impression could be 3 times greater than the ad that just ran, or maybe even the addressable ad. And I think there's a future where we don't have the level of clutter that we have on radio that we kind of escaped from, but we're going to have ads. We're going to have breaks and pre-produced ads that can be delivered really efficiently. But I just want to protect the authentic part. And, if you look across the ecosystem, like Dirty Little Secret, they haven't really figured out how to price for that yet and how to actually make sure that the market realizes the value of those impressions. In radio, they figured this stuff out a long time ago because they had 100 years to sort it out. But it's like you could buy whoever your favorite, Jim Rome or whoever, there'd be a live read price that was like 4 times the spot price. Podcast hasn't figured that out yet. Yeah. You might have to pay a talent fee. You might have to make a longer commitment, but it's just starting to figure it out, and I hope it doesn't get scattered. Sorry, that's a little bit of ranting on my part, but this is important stuff, right? Yeah, exactly. The medium lends itself to that kind of thing. You can rant here in ways that are harder elsewhere. But anyway, so is that a unique feature in audio, do you think, that kind of native endorsement opportunity for brands? Because I feel like it's unique, but I also realize, when all I've got is this hammer, everything's a nail, right?
Well, it's unique in one lens, and it's unique in like media, right? It's different than CTV or print or whatever, where like you had aspects of that with like content marketing and stuff in digital. But I would say it's unique from that perspective, and it's not unique if you take a different perspective and think of podcasters as creators, all right? And a lot of influencer marketing and creator marketing is that personal recommendation, and this is one form of building that audience in medium, but having an Instagram, page focused on fashion is another way to do it, or a YouTube, thing about doing, stunts on YouTube is another way to build that audience. And then a lot of those are often driven by personal recommendations and things of that regard. So I would say, given that it's like, audio's done it longer with radio and stuff, sure, that might have started there, but in many ways that's just shifted more towards this realm of, again, brand investing with individuals and creators and authenticity. And so I think podcast is a huge proponent of that. But like, you brought up before the time spent thing. Like last year in our state of digital, we had a section on audio, and pretty much that's all I talked about was like, you've got Mary Meeker used to put out this famous report that always had the amount of time spent to ad dollars, and you found they always caught up. Like mobile, remember when I started at LUMA in 2014, mobile was at 5% and 20% of the time, and then it jumped up there. Audio's never done that, right? It's always
it's never done that. But why is that?
We'll come back to that. But this year I didn't put an audio section in because in my mind a lot of podcasting audio is actually creators. Like musicians are creators, podcasters are creators, and they're using many different forms to find their audience and monetize their audience. That's not just the advertising load, because they do need to keep that strong and sort of protected, but there's other ways to monetize it.
Yeah.
And so I think, I don't know that's what I'm saying. I don't know that's unique to audio. I think it's a great place to build that core loyal audience because it's such an intimate relationship with podcasters that or podcasts you really follow and listen to.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Well, so any more thoughts on why audio just never catches up? What is it?
Well, look, I think part of it is that sort of challenge of keeping it authentic, keeping it host-read. There weren't tools to, easily create an audio ad and then just distribute it all around like you can on a meta ad, right? It's very easy to get an image, put it on, create 40 different options, and then go optimize them, right? Yeah. There's just the creation problem. AI actually is a great way to do that. It's like, how do you get 9 million advertisers into audio? You would need to use AI to say, here's the general prompt, create it in this authentic voice, instead of going out and hiring people to do all that. It's you need efficiency of scale, and then there's just challenges with the addressability and stuff because of the RSS feed, because it's not being streamed, so you don't a lot of times it's downloaded. You've got all those challenges, which are more structural and fundamental. And then I think there's, because of that, And because of both those challenges, you then have the brand and marketer side that doesn't understand the space. And so there's not forcing and pushing along those lines. Like, Spotify has done a great job pushing streaming, building ad technology to get some of the stuff, but it's still not the, critical medium for, a lot of the marketers here at Cannes, even though they increasingly understand it, but it's still focused on, smaller spots, doing the authentic stuff. It's not how do we get mass amount of performance, and then proving the performance is also challenging because you don't have a click through, right? You don't have a setup. But right now you're seeing it's also tough because how much advertising is being spent on podcast videos on YouTube, right?
Great
is that
question.
Audio advertising or is that video advertising?
Well, that debate's happening all over this place, I imagine, today, and we're having it in internal and external meetings constantly about what is a podcast. I do think we have a little bit of a leadership gap from just a central body that helps us make decisions on how we're going to, build infrastructure to unlock a lot of that growth.
Yeah.
I do think some of those fundamental infrastructure issues are real. I think, what I see and hope that we arrive at in the future, and we'll start winding down here, but a world where you do have platforms that can use tech and get a little bit more standardization on things like attribution. We have methods now, but it's really just all right, you're going to pick one of a number of partners, and you're going to end up trusting the way that they do it, but there isn't clear standardization on the way that impressions are measured. What is an impression? A download we call an impression. It is not. And so we have to get our act together really on a lot of the fundamentals. But separate from that, I think it's interesting the way that you talked about it, in that this is influencer marketing as well. And the part that is influencer marketing, that is that authenticity, if we looked at it as part of the creator economy and influencer marketing, instead of going all right, how do we take influencer marketing and shove it through the same, infrastructure technically, you'd have a much cleaner way of dealing with them as separate types of units, even though they might be in the same venues showing up.
Yeah.
And I think that we just haven't really gotten our act together to even say that out loud and start to organize around it. But I fundamentally believe they're two businesses operating in the same industry, but just
and
haven't
at this point,
really.
You need to be multimedia, right? If you're any sort of creator, and so it's you have an audience, but now you need to capture that. They need to start thinking of themselves as businesses too, and actually using marketing automation that they didn't have in the past. How do you start to engage your audience elsewhere? How do you actually know who they are? How do you learn more about them? And so that you see people creating newsletters and collecting emails and engaging in different forums. And so it's a big part of it. And
it's a huge thing.
I think that's an area where this space is headed, which is how do you then drive that monetization elsewhere, right? Because that's kind of the challenge with the attribution is you have to listen. You can do brand lift studies. It's great for branding on that end. You've had direct response with codes and all the rest, but that's which works pretty well. But how do you optimize it? How do you take that next step further? And so I think for the most part now, if you listen to a podcast, you probably follow them on different places as well. And so I think really taking podcasters or this medium into that space and sort of bridging that gap is where there will be increased opportunity over time.
We're about at time here, and the fact that I feel like we've only covered about 10% of what I want to talk to you about, I think it's a really good sign.
95% of the things.
Oh no, we didn't talk about it. The prep is useless here. But I do want to give you kind of last word on one final topic here, which is when you think toward the end user, $1 trillion, where does that come from? It comes from corporations, right? And they've got objectives. They're the ones funding all of these things that we're all busy trying to scramble to create solutions for. Do you have a word for the brands who, when you look at everything going on in this marketplace, sometimes there is margin in the mystery. There's so much confusion and chaos and change going on right now. Do you see an opportunity for them to leverage the state that the industry is in for their benefit?
Yeah, I mean it's almost too broad of a topic to I think in the state of the audio industry, I think you've seen people leverage it very well to their benefit. who've built big brands by being known in specific categories or really leaning into this space. I think it probably. I mean, it takes. Because of the challenges around attribution and all the rest, it takes like a knowledgeable person to understand that there is still a massive amount of opportunity. There's also a massive amount of being able to drive performance from this sector that I don't think is really priced in yet. And so I would say definitely ability to do that. But I think it takes foresight to really lean in. And so for a lot of CMO, CMO is a tough freaking job, and they change out quickly and they change out often, and so I think that's probably part of the challenge. If you can't prove the ROI quickly and you can somewhere else, it's a little easier. So I think there's businesses that have done a great job sort of finding that niche in here, but that's part of the challenge.
There's a wall of complexity that stands between the marketer and audio as a channel, and those that are willing to find a way over that wall, they reap the spoils.
Yeah.
But a lot of people just go, we'll check the box a little bit, but it's not that important. We don't want to work that hard to get there.
It sort of depends on where marketing probably is in the organization.
Yeah.
Right? If the CMO is like, CEO is thinking a lot about marketing and how they get their word out, and that you have a lot more ability to take that sort of risk.
Yeah.
If it's just a CMO that's doing brand and stuff, there's channels that are easier, and they'll do little bits here or there just to check the box, but it's not. I don't think it's been obvious, and it's not. You're not getting the, like people used to say, you don't get fired for buying blue, right? With IBM, it's sort of that. Like, you're not going to get fired saying, hey, we should spend more on Meta today.
Right, exactly.
Or hey, we should buy a TV ad if you're a big business. But understanding that's part of the challenge. And so,
well, I think we need to do some collective brand marketing, honestly, for audio that it drives business outcomes. But anyway, how do people get a hold of you? Where should they follow you at? You've got great content. You got a great voice in the industry. Where do they find you?
Yeah, mostly just on LinkedIn at Conor McKenna, and then on Twitter as well, which is Conor J McKenna 12, I think. I can't even remember right now. So, but yeah, those are the places to find me. All
right. Well, thanks for joining the Media Roundtable, Conor. This was fun. We're going to do this again. If you'll come back, we will continue the conversation. This podcast is brought to you by Oxford Road, and you can get our weekly newsletter, The Influencer, at oxfordroad.com. I'm going to skip the other plugs and just say thank you to Spotify at Spotify Beach for hosting us here at Cannes, where creativity unlocks the power of storytelling, which gets you better ROI in the long run. Thank you to Connor, to Bianca, Kyle, Haley, Ezra, Mary Jane, Everett, Neil, and the whole team at Podcast One. As always, influence responsibly. All right, so tell me if you've ever heard of any of these companies. Indeed, Shopify, NetSuite, Headspace, Quip, Theragun, Postmates. I'm not only the host of the Media Roundtable, but also CEO of a company called Oxford Road, and we are the world's leading independently owned and operated audio ad agency. And what that means is that we help great companies, many that you have probably heard of on some of the other podcasts that you listen to. We help them test and scale campaigns in audio channels, with podcast being one of those leading channels. Some of the work that we do includes media planning and buying, as well as analytics, attribution, and insights. And we also have a very special way that we deal with creative and copy generation. We have our own proprietary process called Audiolytics that allows us to score ads for their persuasiveness. If you're looking to be involved in audio and you want a partner that can help work with you to make sure that you achieve unprecedented ROI and massive scale, you should get in touch with us at Oxford Road. And by the way, the only reason that we're able to do the work of the Media Roundtable is because we have a great team at Oxford Road that supports us and makes it possible. So, what we're doing is not just a podcast, but we're really trying to help brands live out their values and balance that with their business objectives, which is an increasingly hard thing to do in this world of misinformation and malice that's infecting so much of our media. But at Oxford Road, we don't want to just broker this stuff. We want to impact the industry for good. We want to raise the bar on what gets created. And Oxford Road is helping make that possible through the Media Roundtable. So if you're somebody that's interested in working with an ad agency or a partner on this type of work for your advertising campaigns, go to oxfordroad.com. It's easy to spell. And get in touch with us, or at least just sign up for our free newsletter, The Influencer. That's oxfordroad.com.